Well, good morning everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Fells of Great Britain. Today I'm not in the Lake District or Snowdonia. I'm in a small range of hills called the Trough of Bowland, which I think is in Lancashire. We'll take a look at the map in a moment just to see where I am. And I haven't committed to memory the fells that I'm going to be walking today, so perhaps that will unfold as the walk progresses. But the Trough of Bowland lies just to the west of the Yorkshire Dales and to the south of the Lake District National Park, and a bit to the north of the Peak District National Park. It isn't a national park in its own right, and so it's arguable to which national park it ought to belong, geographically speaking. But today is going to be a rather shorter walk for me. Perhaps one I can complete because I've had such difficulty completing walks recently. So let's see how I get on. I hope you stay with me and get something from my experiences today and some of the footage that I hope to get. The weather is glorious. Well, it always is. I only ever pick days for walking that are in good weather. But there it is. As you get older, you don't want to walk in the rain and the wind. So let's crack on. I'll show you the route map now and I'll catch you in a moment. Our walk starts in Bowland Forest in the county of Lancashire in the northwest of England. And we begin our walk in a valley known as the Trough of Bowland, which runs from the small village of Dunsop Bridge in the south, following the route of an unclassified road which heads northwest for 3 miles. Free parking is available at Sykes Nab, just south of Sykes Farm, for around 20 cars or so. At Trough Barn, we leave the unclassified road and head on a well-defined path northeast up onto Whin Fell. We then take the steep path known as Ouster Rake down to Brennand Farm, at which we turn east on a surfaced path for around half a mile. At the United Utilities facility at the head of the valley, we turn due south, remaining on this path, which follows the River Dunsop back to Dunsop Bridge. We stay on this path for around 2 miles. At Closey's Barn, we take the path west, which is rather ill-defined, to the cattle grid at the head of Dryster Clough. Thereafter we turn northwest and continue along the unclassified road back to the car park. The walk covers around 8 miles and will take anywhere between 4 and 6 hours to complete. Beautiful views opening up. Very different from the Lake District. It's not rocky, but lovely rolling hills covered in pasture, although very few sheep on them. But the view back is quite lovely. This gate frames a wonderful vista. So the trough, you can clearly see the trough that gives these fells its name. Beautiful. Although around here, not quite so beautiful. A little bit muddy, in fact. But this is quite beautiful here. Look at this. I don't know if this will show up at all on this weedy little camera. There's a lovely little pool. I've got to get across it, so from a navigation perspective it's a bit irritating, but it's lovely. It's got little tiny meniscus of ice on the top there. I don't know if it will come through in the video. It's little things like this that keep a walk interesting. Wonderful views opening up as we gain altitude. I wasn't expecting to see the sea. You can just about see it in that cleft there, out to the west, and further in the far distance you can see one of this country's enormous wind farms located in the sea between England and the Isle of Man. In the Irish Sea, I guess it's that's where it's located. The ascent today is only about 1,500 feet, and that's above sea level. I don't know at what altitude I was parked at, but in the route for this walk at the beginning of this video I usually post the stats, so if any of you are interested you can just look at that graph at the beginning of the video. A wonderful bird there, I don't know what that is. I'm not a twitcher, but I do enjoy birds, of the feather variety, of course. At my age, there can be no other. Now, this kind of land is the territory of the Skylark, and they'll be nesting in the grass at this time of year. And they make that lovely bird song, not to entertain us, but to scare us away, because there we go, you can hear them now. Or maybe not. They get spooked by people, and so they rise up into the air and squawk their song in defence of their nest. Well, it's exquisite today. It's that time of year when there are great prospects for warmer, sunnier weather. Even though it's sunny today, it's a bit chilly. But the views are to die for. Glorious. A little bit of mist opening up there in the far distance. So we've got this lovely panorama going all the way across the fells and out to the sea. Right, well, this is the top of this fell. As I said earlier, I didn't load these fell names into memory, and I need reading glasses when I'm out, so I'm not going to look on my phone to try and figure out what the name is. I'll stick it up in a subtitle in this video. But there's something over there which is somewhat higher, which I'll do on another day perhaps. But coming round here, like so many of these fell tops in the Pennines and the Yorkshire Dales, they're very featureless. There's never any kind of trig point or cairn, and I don't think even the pasture is any good. It's just gorse and very squelchy underfoot. So I'm not going to loiter here very long, just enjoy the views. So I think I'll find somewhere to get out of the breeze. It's not very windy, but try and find somewhere to sit. I might struggle there. There aren't any rocks or anything to sit on. Just to eat my lunch and then wend my way back down through the valley to the car. It's just so restful and peaceful. There's nobody here, and some of the paths you can see are not well frequented. This is a very lonely, unvisited, seldom visited area of that mountainous ridge that runs north-south up through the spine of England, collectively called the Pennines, but along the way we give them different names. The Peak District, the Yorkshire Dales, the Trough of Bowland. The Lake District, though, stands apart further west and isn't really part of that ridge. It's geologically quite different. Right, enough of my jibber jabber. As Mr. T would have said, enough of your jibber jabber. Oh, it's so very muddy. I wouldn't like to be on these fells in mist. I think without some kind of GPS navigation, it would be quite difficult in mist to find your way around. There are just so many little furrows and paths going in all directions. It's difficult to find the one that is the one you want. So coming up is a gate. That's always a very helpful sign, isn't it? Well, this, there you go. Oh! Oh, right, okay. Not just wet, boggy. Oh dear, oh dear. You just don't see these things coming. You think you're just stepping on a bit of mud and your foot disappears. Oh dear. And I made the deliberate decision not to wear gaiters because I thought I would be on a decent path, but that's just not the case. Oh dear, onwards. Oh well, this is something else, isn't it? What a lovely view. The sunshine lighting up the fells over there. And I'm in shadow here. Just magical. So the tops might not be very interesting, but the views are absolutely spectacular. There is something about this kind of landscape that's quite different from the Lake District. It has a different kind of beauty. It's less stark and rugged. It creates the impression of being a little more easy to deal with, a little more inviting. But of course, when you get on these fells, typically they're not as good as the mountain the mountain scenery in the Lake District. Some of the paths are very difficult to navigate, but to get a view like this, well worth the effort, I think. Well, this is a surprising descent path, very unlike the ascent, which was just grassy and very slow and relentless. This is really quite precipitous here, very muddy and rocky. It's only going to be brief, but it really is quite exciting. So even the Trough of Bowland has something that's a little bit similar to Lakeland. As you can see, there's a deep furrow with rocks and mud. Not bad conditions today, but I think in extreme weather, in rain, heavy rain, this would become a little bit of a torrent. So this vantage point here is just spectacular. You can see, as I pan the camera around now, down into the valley where I'm heading next, into the sunshine. I shall greatly look forward to that, and out of the wind. It should be really quite nice. I've been on the down through that valley before. It has quite a nice path that's maintained by United Utilities, the water services provider to the whole of the northwest. So just looking over there on that flank, you can see a lot of evidence of small landslips where the topsoil was just sheared away and fallen down into the valley. So it's not a wholly stable landscape here. The sun's come out now and it's just glorious. So this is the only location where I've actually seen the soil stripped away to expose the underlying geology. You don't get any sense of what's underneath all the bog when you're on the tops, but here there seems to have been a massive landslip at some point. I don't think we're looking at any kind of ice or glacial erosion here, as is typical in the north of England. I think that's a landslip. And the rock underneath doesn't look particularly volcanic. I'd say it's limestone, but we're not in limestone country. That lies in the Yorkshire Dales further east. If any of you are watching this and know something about geology, I'd be grateful for your comments. An interesting little amphitheatre there opened up. And coming around here, just move the camera down. We continue the descent. And the path is a little bit easier now. I'm thankful for that. And the sun goes in and out and casts its wonderful shadows on the landscape. This is what you get when you walk at elevation. You can see the shadows cast by the clouds over there, and they move across the landscape at quite some pace. You don't get that sense when you're on the ground. You just feel you're going in and out of shadow. You don't actually see the movement of the shadow as the clouds move across the sun. That's one of the great privileges of walking the fells, or walking at elevation, really. It's just wonderful. Oh, well, this is a bit of a challenge, isn't it? This gate is in an enormous puddle. There's no stile on either side. So I'm going to have to climb over this wall. I'm not walking in that. There is a stepping stone, but it looks really deep. Coming down now to a farmer's gate. This is what's interesting about some of these rights of way in the UK. They go through farms. This one goes right through his yard. So I need to be courteous. First lambs of the season. First time I've seen them. There'll be many more. It is only early March. Looks like there's one lying in the sunshine there. Need to be very careful that I don't disturb them. Oh, they really are very, very young, aren't they? Literally just newborn. Beautiful, wonderful. Delightful time of year, isn't it? So up there is where I've just come down from. You can just about make out the steep path which goes in a diagonal direction from the top on the left down to the bottom on the right. Now I'm now on quite a decent path. Change the exposure, which will take me all the way back to Dunsop Bridge, which is the only real village hereabouts. My plan for today was to take a diversion back up onto one of the fells to cut off the end of the road route to make it a bit shorter, but it does involve a bit of an ascent. So when I have my sandwiches and a bit of a sit down, I'll look at the clock and see if I've got time to do that. There's a rather better view of the landslip than I pointed out earlier. Looks rather more severe from here. Another landslip over there. In fact, as I pan round now, you can see this whole flank of this hill here is, it's got all these horizontal striations where there have been these micro slips. The whole of that side of the hill is unstable. Interesting. More sheep. Bit of a feeding station there. As I come down here, you can see that there are some buildings, and that's United Utilities installation. So I don't know exactly what goes on here. It's some kind of water abstraction. There's a pipeline that runs down the valley back to Dunsop Bridge, and then presumably to centres of population like Lancaster and perhaps Preston. Bit of a stark change. Been in a bit of a wilderness for several hours, and then you come down to this, and man has left his mark on the landscape. Well, this is a good thing. This is to supply water to people's homes. There are many populations around the world that do not have access to water, so we should be very thankful that we live in a country where we do have ready access to water, although it's rather expensive these days. But it comes at a price, and it does mean that we get installations like this in otherwise completely unspoilt landscapes. But it's done quite sympathetically, and I'm enjoying this nice path that United Utilities have constructed. Nice bit of information about the local flora and fauna and the do's and don'ts around water abstraction. And more sheep. Get my pronunciation right, more sheep. So just up ahead there is the path I was going to take to cut off the nose of this hill here to make my journey back to the car a bit shorter. But it looks as though from the map that path winds its way all the way up to the top of the ridge. So I'd pretty much have to climb up to the same altitude that I've come down from. So it's just not worth it. I'll take the hit and stick to the path. There might be another little path that will allow me to cut off the very end of this this ridge here, but we'll see. Now, as I walk along this path back to Dunsop Village, it'll take a while. I thought I'd just share with you some of the results of the research I did on this walk before setting off. I always like to just dig into the history, and what I usually do is consult the relevant Wainwright book, but of course the Trough of Bowland is not covered in any of his books. So what did I find out? Well, the Trough of Bowland is quite interesting. I think I said earlier that it's not a national park, so it's not owned by any government agency, and charities like the National Trust and Heritage England are not really involved with it. It's still one of those parts of the country that is in private land ownership and has been for many centuries. It's currently owned by three major landowners by the Duke of Westminster, who's the second biggest landowner in this country, second to the monarch, and Lord Clitheroe, whoever Lord Clitheroe is, and the Duchy of Lancaster. Those three together own what is probably, in my estimation, 100 square miles of elevated countryside that is the Trough of Bowland. And it's currently used for precious little other than grouse hunting, which is a seasonal activity. But when you go walking in the Trough of Bowland, you see lots of little wooded areas where gamekeepers have got special areas in order to raise and rear these grouse, feeding areas and nursery areas. So it really is quite a big industry. There's sheep farming, of course. You've seen sheep earlier clips in this video. But there really are only two farms who work this land. There's Sykes Farm, and I can't remember the name of the other farm. So unlike other parts of the country, unlike the national parks, it really has an individual usage history. It's not like the Lake District. It doesn't have a long history of farming. If you go back to prior to 1507, so I read, this whole area was just a hunting ground for the king. And after 1507, it was handed back to landowners of the time. And I read that the reason for that was that the Crown started to establish much more productive hunting areas like Windsor Park, for example, and the New Forest down in the south of the country. So they didn't really need to come up here to the north and hunt things like deer on this countryside. And then, of course, much later on, it became famous for its association with the Pendle let's say this again, the Pendle witch trials, which took place in 1612, I think it was. And in a small Lancashire village at the foot of a hill called Pendle Hill, a number of witches were rounded up, put in a cart and taken over the Trough of Bowland to Lancaster to be tried for witchcraft. And they were all found guilty and they were hanged as a result. It's kind of a historical way of cancelling people, isn't it? We don't we don't actually hang people, but we destroy them by other means. What a superstitious age that was. Absolute fear of witchcraft and anyone who might be considered to be a witch, and it was all decided on personal testimony. There was never any hard evidence for the execution of any of the witches in this country. And in fact, the Pendle witches, one of the families involved was prosecuted on the basis of evidence given by a 9-year-old girl who was a member of the family. Can you believe that? And her evidence was pivotal in establishing the guilt of this family. And so they were all dispatched to Lancaster to be tried. And as it turned out, they were convicted of witchcraft and sentenced to death. Just got to go over this cattle grid here. So there really isn't anywhere in this country that doesn't have some kind of interesting history, and I always enjoy digging out information such as it is for the areas where I walk. I think it just gives an added level of interest in the activity that I undertake on the fells. Right, I've got to press on now. Well, the sun has gone in for the day now, I think, so that's always a good thing when you get to the end of a walk. At least you don't get back to the car wishing that you were still out there enjoying the sunshine. I've lost count of the number of walks I've been on over the years where the better weather has been when I got back to the car. So I'm at the end of my walk now. I've had this rather too long road walk. I never really like being on tarmac for any time at all, really. I get very tired ankles, but this has been about 2 miles, I think, along here to get back to the car, but it was unavoidable. I think I need to get out of the way now. There's a car coming. Nice Bentley Bentayga there. Couple of £100,000 worth of car. Right, well, my vehicle's in view now, so I'm going to bid you farewell. And if you stayed with me to the end, do leave some comments if you feel minded to. And also consider joining me again when I next walk the fells of Great Britain. Bye for now.